guy goer, internet goer, go to the internet. You don't really go there. Anyways, welcome to $0 Productions' hilariously popular show, title pending. Now that we've got that out of the way, we can go to the beer of the week. That's the problem. That's the, not the problem. That's the feature that everybody comes back for, as far as I know. It's a feature I come back for. Anyways, today's beer of the week is Guinness Rye Pale Ale. And since I couldn't think of the word feature and for some reason said a different word, we already have to drink, which is just impressive because I haven't even opened my beer. Anyways, I'll drink to that. Cheers. It's a pretty good beer. It's sort of creamy kind of texture like regular Guinness or like the Guinness IPA, if you've had that. It's got that kind of texture. I think it's probably also a nitro beer, but I can't guarantee because it came out of a bottle for me. Anyways, it's tasty. Anyways, I've said anyways like a buttload of times, so I'm pretty sure that means we need to drink. I forgot the drink sign last time, so drink again too. So, not off to a good start if you want to avoid alcoholism, but you know, with the elections the way they are, that seems to be the way that American people are going nowadays. Anyways, today's video is the top 5 final encounters from video games. It's kind of boss fights for the most part, but one that I decided to add was not a boss fight per se. Let's just go on to it. Number 5 is the Warthog Escape from the End of Halo. It's not really a boss fight, but when I was thinking of boss fights, I was thinking of like the last, you know, little chunk of a game where you would normally fight a boss, and for some reason Halo popped into my mind, and I was like, yes, this is actually much more memorable than a lot of final boss fights that I've ever had. And I think part of the reason for that is that it was just done so well in a unique way that kind of ended the game on a high note. Because there wasn't another part in the game where you drove a Warthog quite like this. You know, you're careening down exploding tunnels, being shot at from all sides, and all sorts of crazy stuff is going on. The ship is blowing up, and the whole world is gonna blow up. Spoilers. Do spoilers count as a drinking moment? Because pretty sure they do. I mean, if you haven't played Halo by this point, I'm pretty sure that you did that to yourself, so, you know, whatever. So this was a very cool use of the vehicle as kind of the last challenge instead of a boss fight, which I think worked a lot better, because in a first-person shooter, most of the time a traditional boss fight just doesn't really make sense. You know, in, like, most of the Halo games, you don't find bosses per se, but, you know, instead you find, like, in certain areas you'll have several really big aliens coming down to kill you, or, you know, a kind of a tactical encounter where they're attacking from multiple sides and different things like that, and it's all kind of challenges based around that. And I think this, in lieu of a boss fight or one of those kind of moments, is really a clever gameplay choice, and it really just stuck with me all these years. I'm gonna move on to number 4. Number 4 is from the old Nintendo era. His name is Chaos! Grrr, I am Chaos. Anyways, Chaos was really cool. Final Fantasy 1, for those of you who don't know, go play that game. You're missing out on a part of history. Chaos was a really cool boss, because, you know, I think he kind of was one of the original defining factors for what is an RPG boss now. They've got a crap load of hit points, they deal a crap load of damage, they got a lot of cool, unique moves to them, and they're just kind of this cool capstone on the end of, you know, usually with an RPG, especially a JRPG like this, nowadays it's just commonplace to have each bit of the story unfold one by one until you finally find this giant boss at the end, and he's got all kind of crazy and terrible power, and usually multiple forms, but that didn't come till later. But with this one, I think it was really cool, because this is in that early era of gaming that I've kind of talked about before in some video or another, where story just didn't matter for the most part. You know, there was stories there, but they were basically only there to present the gameplay to the player in a way that makes sense. And if there wasn't a story, most games would have probably still worked. You know, you take away the story from Super Mario Brothers, it's completely unaffected. Take it away from the original Legend of Zelda, it's completely unaffected. You know, a lot of people didn't even realize there was really a story to any of these games, but in Final Fantasy, it's very difficult to jump over this thing. It's got a story that actually drives the player to want to play the game. It's not because of the gameplay necessarily. The gameplay was still fun, and it was very unique and intuitive for the time, but most of the reason that I come back to Final Fantasy 1 every now and then and play through it is because it's got a really cool story. And it's presented in a very simple way because of the technological limitations of the time, but they got over that because they were clever, and they implemented a lot of really cool elements into the story and the gameplay that just worked synonymously very well. Also, he was the first boss and the last boss, and that's just neat. We're going to move on to number 3. Final encounter number 3 is also a boss, because actually the rest of them from this point on are bosses. The only one that wasn't a boss was obviously the Warthog fight, because it's not really a fight, it's a flight. You know, fight or flight. Flight is like a sampler of beers, so I think we have to drink. These jokes are getting worse. Anyway, big boss number 3 is the Nightmare from Link's Awakening. I drew that myself. Are you proud of me? Good, you shouldn't be. The Chaos one came out okay, but I don't know. Nightmare is kind of a weird blob-looking thing in the first place. So, I mean, I wasn't really sure what else to do with that. Nightmare is really cool because he was one of those first few bosses to have, like, a lot of forms. You know, like, nowadays, a lot of times you'll see 1 or 2 final forms. I think he had, like, 5 or 6. Some people have even said too many forms. And I'm not sure I agree with that. I don't know, because every form was fun to fight, and without all that many, I think it would have been a pretty quick boss fight. Because, you know, you beat the first form pretty quick, I remember, and then I think the second or third form was the one that killed me the first time. And then I had to come back a few times before I could kill that form. And then I'm like, what? There's another form? You know, like 3 times. Because it seriously had a lot of forms. And I think that was kind of a cool introduction of the buttload of forms final boss, which has been used in a lot of games since. The video cut out on me. Drink. Anyways, I got distracted for a second, so I'm not quite sure where I was. But anyways, why do I keep saying anyways? This is we're gonna have to invoke a new rule because I keep saying anyways. So chug like you've never chugged before. Chug apparently means 3 drinks, I guess, because I don't want to finish the whole thing. I'm not done with the video yet. Nightmare was also a really awesome boss, just because he explained to you the weight of your actions in this game, and I can't think of another game where the weight of your actions are so heavy. Because basically, over the course of the game, spoilers, we'll have to drink, but over the course of the game, you find out you're on a island in a dream, and you're in the dream of this mysterious creature called the Windfish. And to wake up the Windfish, you can escape from this island. But at the same time, because all of this only exists within the dream, you thereby destroy everything that's there. You lose all the friends you've come to meet. You lose all of the strange characters. Every person on this island is a figment of this windfish's imagination. And to go your own way, you basically are kind of murdering them all and destroying their home. And that's kind of just a dark, creepy moment for a Zelda game. It's the reason I would argue that this is even darker than Majora's Mask or Twilight Princess, which everybody will tell you is the darkest Zelda games. But with this in mind, there's no contest, in my opinion. And it's really also, again, that kind of era of gaming. You just didn't have all these cool stories, and so they explained like one little bit at a time. Like at the end of a dungeon, you'd get this little glimpse into what's going on, and then you finally get to the Nightmare, who's the leader of all of these bosses that you've been fighting that have been called the Nightmares from the first dungeon. And these nightmares are like the dark dreams of the Windfish attacking the good dreams. And you kind of have to choose, like, do I kill the nightmare, waking up the Windfish, and completely removing this world from existence? Or the only other choice, I guess, would be to eternally fight the nightmares off but not kill them and just defend the village. I always thought that'd be a cool alternate ending. That's actually where I had a timeline split in my timeline theory before this whole kind of thing happened with the official canon timeline and everything. Is there's one reality where Link doesn't show up because he decides he's needed there. He needs to defend this world inside the Windfish's dream, and therefore he never returns to Hyrule, and there's never a hero to save the world, and so the gods have to flood it, and that's where Wind Waker comes in, is kind of how my timeline theory worked at one point or another. And the fact that that much information can kind of come from one boss is really kind of cool, because all of it boils down to this is the nightmare, he's attacking the good dreams, and what do you even do in this situation? There's not really a good answer, and that is good writing. Gonna move on now to number 2. Number 2, you get a better visual aid than my crappy drawings. Number 2, you might not recognize, but this is a boss from Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles called Rhyme. He's the final boss, obviously, since this is the encounter at the end of the game, top 5. He's just really neat. He's kind of this weird dragon-looking thing. I'm not really sure how to describe him exactly. You can see for yourself. He's kind of this weird-looking thing. But more than that, mechanically, he's a really cool fight. Because you have to do a whole lot of things. You have to coordinate with your teammates, especially if you're doing multiplayer. He's a much more interesting boss in multiplayer. Because in the single player, you had a kind of a combined spell list that you could do. You could take 2 spells in your list and combine them into a new spell. And to do that in multiplayer, you actually had to cast both spells at the same time. You'd have one player cast one spell and one player cast the other. And you had to get this timing down and do all sorts of funny stuff to beat this boss. So just mechanically, he was a really cool boss. And he was pretty tough compared to the rest of the bosses in that game. And especially on multiplayer, because when you got into multiplayer, it scaled the difficulty based on how many players you had. So you got 4 guys in, then it's even more difficult. And there have been more difficult bosses in probably even just Final Fantasy games, but in gaming in general, there have been more difficult bosses, but this was just kind of I thought it was a nice challenge, but not ridiculously impossible to overcome. In addition, again, the story plays a giant part in this boss. And kind of what he was doing, spoilers again, we'll have to drink. But kind of what he was doing was basically stealing your memories to use them against you. And beforehand, you actually had this little quiz. It was kind of hilarious because basically, as you went through the game, you would fill out a little journal of all kind of random stuff you would encounter across the road. And it just before the final boss, you had this quiz that could give you an advantage against him if you did so well on it or something. And it asks you to remember a lot of these random, just weird things that happened along the road while you were just walking down the road. It'd play like a cutscene, and you'd have to remember all that to get the best possible score in this quiz, to get the best possible advantage against the boss. And it was just kind of this cool thing, because you're like, I thought this was, just a stupid thing that happened that had no purpose. But it totally has a purpose. And some of those things I remembered very well, and some of them my brothers did. And it was kind of funny just growing up with my brothers. We played a lot of games together, and it was really cool to see how each of us remembered each game a little differently. But it was never more clear than that game. And then once you're actually fighting the boss, he's got like the memories of your family that he's using as weapons against you, more or less. And it's just this really cool idea that he's kind of stealing your memories and fighting you with these treasured possessions that because there's nothing that a villain could take that would impact your life more than a memory, really. If it was physically possible to take a memory, that would be like the most cruel thing you could take from a person, in my opinion. And just that idea has really stuck with me as just a really cool mechanic and a really cool reason for this boss to exist. He takes your memories and he feeds off of them. And that's just kind of weird and dark and just crazy as balls. Now we're finally going to move on to the number 1 best final encounter of all time. Do you remember the final boss of E.T.? Good, because I don't either. But the best final boss of all time is Mewtwo. That's right, Mewtwo. He's just awesome. From the original Pokemon games, Red, Blue, and Yellow. If you were that guy that had Yellow that everybody was jealous of at the time, because you're like, I got a Pikachu following me, and everybody else is like, come on, man, I want a Pikachu, he's in the show. But anyways, I digress. Mewtwo was a really interesting boss because everything leading up to him was nothing like him at all. There was no challenge like Mewtwo in the rest of the game. Because the rest of the game, you're catching all these regular Pokemon and kind of strategizing, building your team. Who's got the best type advantage here? Could I make this Pokemon better by giving it this other move? Different stuff like that. And you're fighting all these bosses that are gym leaders, which is a different kind of a boss than Mewtwo was, obviously, because a gym leader has a big team of 6 Pokemon that you have to fight in succession, and then Mewtwo is this one Pokemon. But at the time you find him for the first time, he's usually able to just put a big fat no on your entire team, because at that point I think your team is probably something around 50 to 60, and he starts level 70. Got that in the picture, you can tell. I'm not sure where this guy got a Mew, other than the glitch, which is awesome. I'm getting distracted, so I guess we have to drink. Anyway. But Mewtwo, when you find him, is this ridiculous powerhouse. Not only is he the most powerful Pokemon in the game, but he also outlevels you by probably 10 or 12 levels. at that point. You know, he's just going to smash pretty much most of your guys because very few Pokemon in the original versions resisted Psychic type. So he's just going to Psychic you until you're dead. And if you do manage to do a decent amount of damage to him, then he's just like, oh, bam, I use Recover, I'm fine. And you're just like, how do you even deal with that kind of thing? You know, in the early generations of Pokemon, this was a powerhouse. He was, by a long, long margin, better than every Pokemon in the game, straight up, just by his typing, his moveset, and his stats. And you could deal with that with a big team and catch this legendary Pokemon, but it was pretty hard at the time, especially, you know, the first few times you did it. If you didn't quite get Pokemon, which, you know, I mean, in the first generation, who really got Pokemon, you know? It was really cool to see the first legendary at the time, because now I think it's kind of weird because there's, you know, every new game they add 6 legendaries, and with so many, it's hard to imagine that it all basically came down from this one, because there was other legendaries. You know, there was the legendary bird trio, but they were a little bit different. You know, you could access them earlier in the game, basically just as soon as you had the required hidden move, and then you could just go and find them. And they were difficult to capture, but I mean, they weren't impossible. But you get to Mewtwo, and just to get to Mewtwo, you have to beat the whole game, and then you have to go to this cave, and I think it's 3 or 4 levels down in the bottom of this cave, full of big high-level guys that you're fighting, that you finally get to Mewtwo. And by that time, your guys are all probably pretty beat up, and if you're like me, the first couple of times, you're like out of potions. You can't even do anything about it. And it's really cool to see them expand on that idea every generation, but to have lived through the original generation, I think, is much, much better. And that is my top 5 best final encounters in gaming. So let me know if you liked it. Let me know if you have different opinions on this. Let me know if I'm just completely wrong. Leave a comment, please. And share the video so that we can get more people talking about it. You know, get some people in the conversation, why not? Instead of just me rambling. I think that's what I say in the credits. So, I guess if I say the same thing twice, we usually have to drink, right? So go ahead and drink. And since I'm almost out, you can go ahead and chug. Bye. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to check me out on Facebook and look up my crappy website. And most importantly, would you please share and comment? Because I'd really like this thing to be more of a conversation than just me blabbing about stuff. Alright, thanks, guys.